Hello, and you are back in the Velvet Room with Jokerthefool. This is our 82nd episode, and today we'll be discussing how Americans have no money, Germany is enslaving people, and voting is broken. So, we're going to start off right here with this article from SoFi. I got emails from SoFi, and this one caught my eye. There's a savings slump. There's a lot of stuff. American savings, the headline reads, American savings shortfall could weigh on growth, right? So Americans collectively saved more than $2 trillion during the pandemic. That helped keep the consumer spending and the economy afloat. But in the years since, those savings has dissipated, replaced by a rising level of debt. Pandemic era excess savings now sit at negative 72 billion, according to the San Francisco Fed. So all this, stimulus money that people got, if they saved it, a lot of people had their bank account in one tab, Amazon in the other, and as soon as they got that money, they spent it on useless garbage, right? So if you had any money saved, it's all been eaten up just to pay for gas and groceries at this point. And you've probably a decent chance you've run up credit to fund either just your basic living expenses or to buy even more garbage. So there's no real economic foundation for what we're doing, and there hasn't been for years. And the pandemic gave people this false sense of security in terms of like that $600 in extra unemployment, the stimulus money, the fact that student loans were on forbearance, and a lot of credit cards would put you on forbearance for a bit. So people got into this false sense of security. They were able to build up some savings, or they were able just to be in la la land with their finances, and now it's all coming back to bite not just the average American consumer, but our whole economic system in general is going to begin this very slow and ugly collapse as we've been in this period of stagflation where the economy isn't really growing that much substantially, but we have this period of inflation because of all the money printing that we've been doing, and the pandemic really just turned that up to 11. You had the CARES Act that Trump signed. You've had all this spending that Biden's been doing. Of course, we have the war in Ukraine and Israel that we have to fund, and all of those things as well. It just compounds this issue that we have, this issue of inflation. But the fact that there isn't this strong consumer base, that people aren't financially stable to weather these economic storms, it's just going to make the problem even worse. And that's something that you want to be aware of if you're ever going to think about the economy and you're ever going to be listening to these talking heads talk about the economy, because they'll mention GDP and quarterly growth and the S&P 500, and a lot of that stuff to me, I'd say is absolute hogwash. Ask people on the street, do you feel more financially secure than you were 1 year ago? How much money do you have in savings? Do you have any consumer debt? What's your net worth? And you ask that for the average person. You get that for the average person, and it's going to most likely have gotten worse since 2020 because of all the inflation spending, because of all the government spending and this inflation, and the fact that we have this culture where it's buy now, pay later, and it bites people in the butt. And I'm 26. People of my generation have it really bad with this debt spending. Right, spending like you're in Congress, like you pull up to the freaking drive-through. It's a $10 order, and you have you finance it for bi-weekly payments. But people do stuff like that, and this is it's going to trickle up to the to the federal government, where we have $1.7 trillion in interest we're paying on our $29 trillion of debt. It's completely messed up. So the consumers don't have any money, so they're not going to be able to give the businesses any money, and the businesses aren't going to be able to hire people to then have people that can make money. So if the consumers aren't financially secure, the entire economy collapses, and we are a consumer-driven economy in the U.S. And a lot of the world's economy is dependent on the fact that we buy the shit that China makes, and that India is making, and Pakistan, and Indonesia. All these companies that are pumping out pallets and pallets full of, plastic garbage that just ends up at a landfill that, someone buys from a Walmart, and then, they didn't like it when they get it home, and it just rots in their garage for 10 years before they throw it out. And that's what drives a lot of the global economy, is the fact that there's a legion of people that are willing to do that. But now they don't have money. So the excess savings from the pandemic is down $72 billion. People have taken out more debt. The debt decreases we had from credit cards has basically been completely wiped out. There was this light at the end of the tunnel, or this was this light where it seemed like people were getting out of debt, but they just had a little bit of excess money from all this COVID money, but that all went away. And the debt being king in this consumer culture is really what's taking over, and it's going to bite people in the butt, and that's going to trickle up for the entire system. So it's a bad foundation, which means everything built on top of it, which means the entire American economy, because like I said, it's a consumer-driven economy, and if the consumers aren't financially stable, the economy is not going to be stable. It's not going to be able to grow. And these big companies that are geared towards providing consumer services like McDonald's, Starbucks, Tyson Food, they're not earning as much money. And this is because people don't have as much money to spend, so they're not spending it with these businesses. These businesses then lay off people, and then the people who get laid off don't have money to spend, and it's just an extremely negative feedback loop. And this is why recessions are so devastating. When you have one sector close, it trickles out and affects other stuff. And this is what you're going to keep seeing as people keep bottoming out, relying on debt. You're probably going to see a spike in bankruptcies within the next 5 years. And this is all very unfortunate, but a lot of this is due to people's bad decisions. The fact that you just dicked around for the pandemic years instead of being smart with your money, paying down what debt you could, having your savings bolstered, and then building up your wealth and your ability to earn income as much as possible. It was, let me just buy as much crap on Amazon. Let me just run the McDonald's drive-thru. Let me just, do this and that to, piss all the money I got away. And that's the mindset that's very dominant in the consumer culture, and I think it's a lot of it's intentional. But with that, we're going to move on to this article from Zero Hedge, and it's going to introduce the next two topics. So, shocking headline of the day. This was yesterday, Monday, May 13th. Germany to reintroduce slavery. So, a bit of a shocking one, but young Germans will have to choose between the Bundeswehr, a military service, and unpaid social work. So, either you join the military or you do unpaid social work. Basically, you have to serve the state, either the state's military, or you have to do unpaid social work. There's no there's no second choice. It's not an opportunity. It's a mandate for servitude. Of course, past Germany is a very collectivist country. They're very much focused on the needs of the government and the society over the individual. I am German. I've been to Germany. I was born and raised in America, but my heritage is German. That's why I can say words like Bundeswehr. So you can choose between the Bundeswehr or a year of forced labor and the social services, essentially uncompensated. So, they have budgeted issues with the Bundeswehr because you have 800,000 migrants, I think from Syria, that were imported in 2015, and the fact that a lot of the European economy is based on Germany's economic output. They're a very efficient people. They build stuff well. They've got a hard-working, punctual culture. A lot of stuff that I personally like, and that's done them well. And they've been able to do a lot, be a great country, but they've lost that. And a lot of what built them up to have this great economic output has really been trampled on, and this has been a problem before COVID and all this stuff, and I imagine you had all this economic downturn because of the pandemic that only has exacerbated Germany's economic issues, because the Europe as a whole is having economic issues, not which, you have the migrant crisis, you have the fact that you don't have these populations reproducing at replacement rates, so the workforce is aging out. The social safety networks that people are very passionate about in Europe, and say, Social Security in Europe and, all these European countries is so great and so good. It's all going to collapse if you don't have enough people in the workforce to support the older ones, right? So anything like Social Security is a Ponzi scheme. There's no way to go about it. The money that you're putting into Social Security, it's not the money that you get out when you pull out from it. What you're doing is you're paying the people who paid into Social Security, and then the whole hope is that when you are retired, there are people who are working and paying into the tax system, and it's usually a pretty safe bet. Because you're relying on the state to exist, and it's, a state like the federal government. They've been around for 200 years. They've been doing Social Security for nearly a century now, right? So stuff like that is a bit more of a safer Ponzi scheme to invest in. Of course, you're compelled to do it, but all thing is that this idea that the state of Germany can either force you to serve in the military, and then again, they don't have to put you on payroll, so it's going to save them money, right? And this is, billions, they want another 6 billion euros for the Bundeswehr, something like that. So there's a lot of money that gets spent and demanded for the military, and if you can reduce expenditures anywhere, by compelling people to be in the military under force of violence, or hey, if you don't want to do that, you can do unpaid social work, so you can pick up the trash, you can run these municipal state services, and that's less payroll that they have to pay. They get to pinch those sort of pennies, and it's not an opportunity. Sure, you might be able to put it on your resume, but again, you could do an unpaid internship, and then choose to leave it because you entered into that agreement voluntarily. But no, this is something that states saying, hey, if you don't do this or that, then you're a criminal, right? And then we have the right to treat you like a criminal, which means we get to take you away, put you into custody, all those sorts of things that the state can do. But that's my little spiel on the government. As of course you know, anarcho-capitalist. I never like the government. I'm never going to come from the perspective that I like the government, or the government should exist, or the government is ever a moral actor. Sometimes some of the things they can do is moral. I've talked about legitimate function of the state, but when we talk about the state, we talk about who gets to be in charge of the state, right? And a lot of people say, well, the solution is if we have a system in place that chooses who's in charge of the state correctly, then that'll solve everything, right? So this is why people are so passionate about voting. This is why the politicians of this country hem and haw about American democracy, which doesn't exist. America is not a democracy. It was never founded to be a democracy. The more democratic America has gotten, the worse it's gotten, in my opinion. But people are very passionate about voting, universal suffrage. You get people out to the polls, as many people to vote as possible. You have to engage in your God-given civic duty, your right to vote. If everyone voted, then it would solve everything. That's the idea. But some people say, hey, if we have limits of on people who vote who are actually invested citizens, that would make things better, right? So Vivek Ramaswamy proposes a constitutional amendment that would require citizens 18 to 24 to pass a civics test in order to vote, the same one immigrants take to become a naturalized U.S. citizen. Under his proposal, young Americans could, as an alternative, perform 6 months of military or first responder service, but if none of these requirements are met, they would have to wait until they turn 25 until they could vote in their first election. Now, stuff like this, like basic civics tests, basic IQ tests, ID laws, a lot of this stuff that proves that, one, you are actually a citizen, ID law, having ID laws, and two, like some sort of civics test, or making the age requirements higher, or requiring you to be a net taxpayer, or something like that. These things would be better if we could have people who were voting who were actually invested citizens that had their heads screwed on straight. That would be one thing, but the idea that voting is the system that can be saved is ridiculous. All you need as an argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with the average voter. And this goes for all the boomer cons as well, right? All these, old boomers who've, paid all their taxes, they've served in the military. They'll still vote for the people who will gladly take their rights away. They'll still vote for all the people who will usher in all the COVID nonsense and say, back the blue, even though the blue doesn't back you, right? So there is the idea, and I've talked about this before, that voting and politics is really not about saying, hey, this is what the state can do and who can execute on what the state is allowed to do the best. It's more about a popularity contest, and instead of making the person you're voting for seem the most popular, it's the person that's running against you seem as, you know, the worst person, the Antichrist, Satan reincarnate. And that's the strategy that we fall into. There's like giving people this huge negativity bias against someone, and then they vote for the other person. I mean, that's how, you know, Biden got a lot of his votes, that people were voting against Trump. And honestly, a lot of people who vote for Trump. He's got his base and everything, but a lot of people are going to be voting against Biden, either not voting at all, or voting for Trump, or voting for a third party candidate because they just do not like Biden and his regime. And rightfully so. But a lot of that is an emotional response. I'm not saying that the emotional response doesn't come from the fact that, you know, we've got all this about the inflation and the, you know, the DOJ doing what it's been doing, this, you know, fact that you have the Keystone Pipeline canceled, all these oil contracts being canceled, the absolute hypocrisy, the way he's you know, played cover up for his son, all these sorts of things, the fact that his brain barely works, if at all, and it's very clear that the cabinet and the people around him are the ones running the show and not the president. Although you could definitely make an argument that's been the case since, like, you know, I've been alive, you know, since the Clinton administration. How you can go back even further, something like the Kennedy administration, right? For probably most of the 20th century, where it's been the cabinet and the deep state who've been the ones who've been more in control of what the White House and the executive branch of this country does, rather than the president himself. You could definitely make that argument. I would not disagree with that. So there's that whole, you know, that whole thing. But it's very evident that Biden's a puppet leader, more so than it would be with, you know, like a Clinton or a Reagan or an Obama, who, you know, they definitely were being handled. They were making decisions that other people had given them, but they were very much involved, and they were going along with it in a way that seemed like they were the ones who were calling the shots. And I would say in a lot of cases they probably actually were. But that's my whole thing there. Voting, no matter what you do to make it more exclusive, to get more people who are actually invested in the system to, you know, be the only ones who are voting, it's still not a good system. And again, you know, if that, I would take that improvement. And again, this idea that you have a right to vote, I think Carla Gurka, one of the, you know, Free State Projects, going on about the right to vote. If you think that people have a right to vote, then you think the state needs to exist, and that's ridiculous. Again, you don't have a right to vote. You have a right to self-ownership, right? So you have a right to own your own property, to own yourself, right? So anything that you're voting for, you should have the right to make those decisions in your own life. It's not like, oh, I'm going to send someone to Washington to determine how they spend my tax money. No, you should have your tax money. It's your money. It shouldn't be stolen from you. And then you get to spend it on whatever you deem is necessary. So if you want to send all of your money to Ukraine, or to study how fish run in the desert, or to give it to Dr. Fauci so he can torture beagles, you're in your complete right to. But you shouldn't have your money taken away, and then you have Joe Dipshit from Oklahoma City make that decision for you, right? And that's the argument that I'm making. And that is why voting is never something that's good, because Joe Dipshit is going to do whatever he can to get into that seat of power. And once he's in that seat of power, he's going to lie, cheat, and steal to maintain that power. But with that, I'm out of here. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. This is definitely a bit of a longer one, but we had a lot to talk about. But that was always a great thing. We're heading into the outro now. Thank you for being in the Velvet Room with Jokerthefool. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, whether you're listening on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, or Substack. And be sure to subscribe to my Substack, velvetroompublishing.substack.com, to keep up with Machine to Man and all my other projects.